Hi honey, I'm home. Oh, dinner's not ready yet. Is there anything I can do to help?
Dinner's not ready. No, I've had enough today. And just honestly, can't you just figure it out for yourself? Look around, there's so much to do. Just seriously, I don't need one more thing on my plate.
Jeez, I'm just trying to help.
Hi guys.
Well, that's triggers. That's how we trigger each other, and they're so subtle. So, g'day and welcome to this week's video. And this week's video is on triggers. So, why we trigger each other and how we trigger each other, and why these triggers are a gift in disguise. So, sometimes they don't feel like that. They feel quite annoying, and they give us so much emotion that we have to deal with in our relationship, which ultimately breaks down our relationship. So. A trigger is when someone is basically having a really strong, overwhelming reaction to something which is, not quite, the reaction is over the top for the situation, and it quite often reminds them, usually unconsciously, of a painful experience in their past. So many people are not even aware of what their triggers are or where these reactions come from. And many people don't choose a response, it's a reaction to a situation. So we're not actually choosing the response as such, we're just reacting in that moment. So
in that example, Justin came in and he said dinner's not ready, and I reacted as though he judged me. So I took, I thought, well, you've judged me, and and then you've asked me for one more thing. You can't even see what I've been through all day. Kind of, that was our example.
Yeah.
And what I would do is then Justin would then get triggered back, which is why he ended up leaving the room or the situation, and sort of, he feels blamed and he feels criticised.
Yeah. So these triggers can be very subtle when they happen, but our mental responses actually mask an underlying, our mental response masks the truth underneath the trigger, and our reaction is entirely caused by our own beliefs, our own thoughts, our own judgments of the person or the situation. And it's these judgments and these perceptions as they go through our mind that flood our body with the emotion that we feel in that moment. So in that example there, Maria the situation immediately went through her filters, which reminded her of a past, probably of a time when she felt not good enough for some reason. Guarantee you 9 times out of 10, these triggers always come back to not being good enough, not being worthy, not being lovable, something along those lines. And rightly so, if that's the truth, it feels incredibly uncomfortable, but it's not often the truth. The perception that we have in that moment is actually trying to protect us from feeling a perceived pain in the moment.
So sometimes emotional triggers can lead to positive behaviours, but more generally, and the ones we're dealing with today, more generally they lead us to some of our worst behaviours. When we're reactive, we're explosive at times, or we go the opposite way where we shut down, close off, and wall up and go into a defensive state, into a protection energy, and then there's no communication.
Yeah, so some of you guys might feel like at our worst time when we were separating and facing divorce, we were in such a state of triggering each other backwards and forwards. It got to a point where we were on eggshells. Both of us almost couldn't talk, because the minute you said something, you were hyper sensitive to all of the triggers beforehand. And you get to a point where you're really just walking around on eggshells and avoiding each other. And if you are talking, it's about the most simple logistic things. You're so worried about triggering the other person, and they're worried about triggering you, that you end up in this dance of, not being in a healthy relationship at all. So we know how painful that is because we lived that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one thing I wanted to add is that when we're trying to heal relationship or improving our relationships, triggers can really sort of make us feel like we're coming undone. So people go along and they're like, okay, we're improving our relationship, we're doing these good things, we're doing date nights, and then they go along pretty well for a while, and then all of a sudden there's a trigger and it sort of explodes, and it can cause a great deal of pain, and it can make us feel like, oh my God, here we are again, we're back in this place again. So triggers are patterns as well, unless we deal with them.
Yeah. So yeah, we're still getting triggered. It just means that there's an underlying emotion that's not dealt with. There's an underlying trigger. The trigger is showing us there's an underlying issue that still needs to be resolved within us. And you know, we still get triggered. We still trigger each other, and we're going to show you guys how to deal with these now and why triggers are a gift. So how about we do that first, and then at the deepest level, a trigger is an old pattern from the past where we've felt pain, we've felt fear, we've felt some kind of threat to our system. And when you think about us early on in our life when we're children, we're incredibly vulnerable and we rely on others. We need our parents, we need our caregivers to stay safe, to actually stay alive. So when we perceive that we're being hurt, or there's fear, or there's some kind of pain, we automatically create a pattern in our mind to protect ourselves from feeling that again. It's almost like we tell ourselves, I don't want to feel that again. I'll do whatever I need to do not to feel that again. So now we try to control, try to manipulate, try to manage ourselves and others so that these behaviours don't get triggered. But the trigger's still there. We still are living out patterns now. So for Maria and I, when we get triggered now, if Maria triggers me, it's reminding me that there's an old pain that's not resolved from my childhood or an early stage in my life, where I felt incredibly vulnerable, where I was powerless. Perhaps there was abuse at home, perhaps your family environment wasn't that healthy, but you needed to do it back then. But now when I get triggered or Maria gets triggered, it's not healthy now, and it's actually showing us there's a wound there that we need to release and heal so that we can get past that trigger. And that's why triggers are actually a gift in disguise, because they show us where we're blocked. They show us where our energy is all tied up trying to manage ourselves, trying to manage those around us. And that's why we become exhausted. That's why relationships, that aren't joyful, don't feel like they fill you up anymore. It's just this process of managing each other and ourselves to try and avoid being triggered. The gift is when you actually learn to handle that trigger, now you get to reclaim all that power, all that energy, and build intimacy and love back in your relationship.
One of our really great teachers that we really admire says that triggers are your best friend. And the reason she's saying that is exactly what Justin's just described, that they're a gift, that they're actually the pathway toward healing if we can go through them. And going through them is what we're going to discuss today. We teach this with our clients all the time. And by going through them, what we're referring to is that rather than avoiding them and pushing them away and blaming people and having a big narrative and a big story going on in our mind, all the reasons why the other person's at fault and why they shouldn't do that, what we're going to be doing is doing the opposite. We're going to be looking inside, we're going to take ownership, look inside and actually try and resolve the trigger so that we don't have it anymore, ultimately.
Yeah.
So we're going to show you, we're going to give you some pointers to enable you guys to do that and see the gift that it brings into your life and into your relationship. So shall we go through that?
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. So we recommend lots of different strategies, but here's five of our key steps that we say we call doing the trigger work, really. So this first step, or the first point, is really to shift your perspective on what a trigger is, and to own your own trigger. So what we're talking about here is really when you feel that trigger, where you feel that surge of emotion or that strong reaction that you get, whether it's to shut down, push away, or to actually do what I did, which was to grouch or snap back. What we're going to say to ourselves is, wow, there's a trigger. And in my mind, the mantra I use is, this has come up for healing. But we're gonna shift our perspective and say, this is a trigger, it's come up for healing. It's not about the situation. There's something in me that's caused this reaction. It's an opportunity and an invitation to go inwards, to actually reflect and work out what's going on. There's something's coming up for healing that I need to do. So maybe I need to do the healing work, maybe I need to update a mental model, look into my beliefs, look into what's going on inside of me. So that's the shifting of your perspective and owning your trigger. Really just saying that instead of when triggers come up, we usually go into anger or or the opposite,
blame or
sulking,
judgment or something.
or victim kind of mentality. But what we're going to do is shift our perspective and say, wow, I've got an opportunity now to heal this, and I can do that, and it's going to improve our relationship. So that's the first one: shift your perspective, own your own triggers. Number two is actually inside the moment. So this is a tool that we recommend, or a step we recommend, that when you do get triggered, what you need to do is drop resistance to the trigger. So when it comes up, what our body wants to do is fight or flight, which is either the sort of aggressive response or the runaway response and shut down. What we're going to try to do, and this is a practice, and you just practice over time. Sometimes you catch them, sometimes you miss them, you go back and address it. It's okay. It takes practice to retrain our nervous system, to rewire our nervous system, because ultimately you don't feel safe. When you've got triggered, you don't feel safe. Your body doesn't feel safe. So the other thing is it feels incredibly uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it's
so
a
I think
very uncomfortable feeling. So we have to rewire our nervous system to handle discomfort. And so that's what we're going to be doing with this, by taking a conscious breath, trying to relax your body, and just going, that shifting perception process. I know this is a trigger, I'm okay, I'm safe, there's nothing. Obviously, this is not when we're in an abusive relationship, this is when we're in a constructive relationship. And we're going to just try and calm ourselves down and feel what we're feeling, and listen to the words playing out in our mind, listen to the narrative, listen to the story, listen to the meanings, because they're all going to give us clues as to what's actually going on.
Yeah, I think it's really important just to say, in this step, inside the trigger, this is where we really need to catch ourselves. And this is a lot of the work is done here, just recognizing you've been triggered, because it will feel painful, it will feel uncomfortable. You're going to feel this contraction in your body or anger flaring. This is where we really need to commit to this process of healing and say, look, if I react to this trigger, it's not going to. If we react to a trigger, it will replay, because we miss the opportunity to see what it is deeper and heal it. So if we react to it, we automatically keep the trigger for next time. So it's important to understand that there's going to be pain, there's going to be discomfort, and that's part of it. That's okay, and that's why we need these practices, why we need the understanding.
But I will add that if you react, that's okay too, right? It's all right. But what we're going to try and do, if there's a reaction, we're going to go, take a breath, try and relax, and just, at times, relaxing in the moment and breathing in the moment, you're going to need to actually remove yourself from the situation. And you might say, hey, I know where this is going. We've been here before. I don't want to do that this time. I want to try something different. I just need to get a moment to myself, just to, reset my energy level and come back. And I will be back soon, but can we just pause? I just don't want to keep going down this route. And so that's an absolutely wonderful way to give yourself to create space in that moment, to create a little bit of space. Because what often happens is we trigger, and now we used to call it ping pong. We'd just be ping ponging the ball back to each other. Bang, bang, bang. I can't handle my energy. Here, you have it.
It's more and more intense each time it comes.
That's right. Yeah. And it's just painful. So, but I really want you to watch your thoughts, take those breaths, listen to the story. It's just a story. It's hiding. The story is trying to say to you, this is all happening and these are all the reasons you should be mad and angry. But what actually, it's sort of like a smoke screen. It's hazy and smoky up there, and it's hiding the deeper truth and the deeper wound. And the reason it wants to keep you up there is it's protecting you from feeling. So, but what we want to do as adults is we want to start feeling now. We're not kids anymore. We can do it. We can manage it. We're also in a different relationship. We're actually not in the relationship back when those wounds were made. We're in a different one, hopefully. We're in a different relationship now. All right, that's step two. So step two is inside the moment, try and relax and just calm down and drop the resistance to what you're feeling.
Yeah. Step two is a bit like, when you're in it, it's a bit of damage control. You realise it's heightened, and at that point it's like, right, I just need to get through this without creating more trouble.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So step three is really the next stage of that, which is to self-soothe. So we've caught ourselves a little bit of time. We've bought ourselves a little bit of time, or perhaps the situation's over. Justin's walked out the door. All right, it's done. the damage is done. But what we need to do now is self-soothe. This is us reparenting ourselves in so many ways. So you can choose two sorts of things. You can self-soothe or you can co-regulate. So self-soothing looks like any practice that you use to relax, to ground your energy, to come back to the center. It's really all about providing comfort to yourself. And so for me, it's a bit of self-talk usually. It'll be something like, I can see what's happened, it's all right. We also teach a range of different practices from breath work to some other different tools, but we can't go into those right now. And co-regulation, we'll come back to this. Co-regulation means sort of reaching out to a trusted friend or a great relationship that you had. You might not, this doesn't mean replaying the incident, it doesn't mean bitching and swearing and bad mouthing at all. It actually just means you're co-regulating, you're trying to bring your energy back up to a neutral state so that you can switch off the fight-flight instinct in your brain and switch back on, switch back into a logical, more rational part of our brain. So that's what we're trying to do in this step, self-soothing, co-regulating. You want to add something?
Oh, I think in this step, something for me that really helps me is to say that I can handle this. I can handle this. I don't know how many times a day I tell myself I can handle this. I can handle this. Because in that moment when you do get triggered, it feels out of control. Like internally, we've gone into that fight-flight response. And that, if you imagine a scared, terrified child or, a scared animal, for instance, or something, it's a scared child they don't feel like they can handle it. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. There's too much going on. So telling yourself, I can handle this, breathe, relax, drop your shoulders. I go for a walk in nature. That's my go-to. If I'm, Maria and I have had a hiccup and it's emotions are up and about, and I'm like, I need to go for a walk, and I'll go to the beach for a walk and just tell myself, okay, I can handle this, and then we come back to step 4.
Yeah. Just one other thing is that sometimes the self-soothing and co-regulating may take you some time, particularly initially, and that's okay. Just as long as you do come back, it's very important to repair. How we repair in our relationship is what it was all about. You really do need to come back, and if it is taking a bit longer than you expect, then tell your partner, this is a big one for me. I've just got a lot to deal with at the moment, and I'm finding this really difficult. So I just need a little bit longer before I want to speak more about that. And that's okay. It's absolutely fine. All right, step 4. So we're outside the moment. We've come back to at least a neutral state where our energy is back to sort of our normal levels. We're able to have a conversation again. We're feeling calm, centered, and more rational and logical. And this is where we want to go and investigate. We want to go and we want to be curious, and we want to go into ourselves and say, what just happened? What's really going on? So this might be, some people can do it very quickly. Once you become more proficient at this, it can happen quite quickly, and on small triggers or things that aren't as deep or aren't as sort of, you don't have such a big response, this can happen quite quickly, but sometimes it can take hours or days to sort of sift through what's going on and release all the stories. But there's lots of different ways to do this, but what we want you to really do is address more deeply what's actually happening. What am I feeling? What's actually going on? What does this remind me of? When did I first feel this emotion? And you are going to do what we call the trigger work, and again, we teach a range of tools that we won't go into today, but it's really is a wonderful process of discovering what's going on. And what you're going to do is ideally bring that back to your partner.
One way to do that, just briefly, is we're so afraid of feeling, and that's why the trigger, we get stuck in our thoughts, we get stuck in the judgment, the blaming, the justification, all of that stuff, like Maria said, is a smoke screen. If we can drop into the feeling and actually feel the discomfort, feel what is going on in our body, and ask it what it needs. Like, if I feel something in my body and I ask it what's going on, what am I feeling, what are you trying to tell me? Quite often the message is that I feel, undermined, I feel disrespected, I feel not good enough. And then do I ask another question below that, or what is it about that makes me feel that? You can dig down into what the core belief is, and usually the core belief is that I'm not good enough, or I'm afraid I'm not lovable, or I'm scared that I'm worthless or something along those lines, which is just not true for any of us. But that's what we feel, and that's the story that we play, and that's why we try and defend against that. Because if we believe that, well, that's painful.
And interestingly there, I don't know if anyone else picked up on this, but as Justin was using, outlining some of those wounds, you could hear the fear. It's all fear, fear, fear. It's often what's below this is fear. And so we've got all these defense mechanisms so we don't feel afraid, which is a very horrible feeling to feel when for anybody actually, young or old. All right, last step is step number 5, and this is a really, really important step. So often our triggers are about deep subconscious programs, and they were developed in relationships that we had in our childhood. And sometimes they are outside of our visual or auditory memory, but they're deep in our programming. So when it's really not a leap then to understand. It's really hard to solve some of our triggers and to get to the bottom of them. And if that's the case, seek help, get some help. There's loads of different modalities. This is the work we do. We help people get clarity and actually can heal their triggers. We do it through timeline therapy and neuro-linguistic programming tools and somatic experiencing. But there is lots of different modalities out there that you can explore, and that will help you heal the trauma. It's going to help you create authentic beliefs that align with who you are today, not who you were when you were younger. And the most important thing here is that some of these wounds need to be healed in a relationship. And I'm not talking about in the relationship with your partner. I'm talking about the relationship with a therapist, or the relationship with whatever the modality is, of the person that's delivering that modality. And you can create this incredible safe space for you to explore and heal whatever it is that needs healing. And then that trigger, you're going to explain that to your partner, ideally. Come back. If you've got to the bottom of it yourself, great. You would go back and ideally explain it. And your partner then understands a bit more about you, understands a bit more about how you were programmed. And they might not have seen it at all. That might not be part of their experience at all.
Well, that's part of the gift, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It brings
the more
intimacy.
you understand your triggers, the more you understand your trauma and work through your stuff, as we call it, the more you do that and understand the mechanism within you that how this operates, and you heal a lot of that stuff within yourself, you automatically look at your partner and have more compassion, because you realize, hey, I'm struggling with this, and this is really hard to process some of this stuff, and my partner is a perfect match for me emotionally and energetically, therefore they're dealing with this stuff too. So it actually breeds compassion, which builds intimacy between the two of you. So again, that's where the gift in this triggering is as well.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we could talk about this, because this is such a we could go on about it for quite some time, because we are incredibly experienced in this area, because we've both had childhood trauma. So for Justin and I understand now so many of Justin's triggers that at times I can actually provide a space for you to explore it, but sometimes pointers for Jay. And that happens vice versa. You'll provide space for me, and sometimes just give me a little point like that. And it's gentle and it's caring, but it's compassionate. And then what the gift is that these triggers that used to tear us apart bring us together. And that's the gift. We're now healing together, and our relationship is a place where we come to heal, and we provide space for each other, for our nervous systems to be a bit frayed, and it's okay, but we can come together and heal those and rewire relationship for the two of us. And that's as far as I'm concerned, it's an incredibly loving thing to do.
Yeah, beautiful. We might finish there, because that's a great place to finish. We could go on about triggers for hours and hours, and we do with our clients and in workshops and things, but right now let's leave it there. And hopefully you can see that triggers, although they can feel scary and take us over pretty quickly, so we're unconscious, we become unconscious with them. When we can learn to be conscious with them and aware and actually work through triggers, they are the gateway to freedom. They are actually guiding you to what is holding you back in life, in all areas of your life, not just your relationship, but work, health and fitness, whatever it is. They all operate the same way. So working with triggers and letting them be your friend is a very powerful way to become empowered as a person. So
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
All right.
All right, guys, we'll see you on the next video.